So this is Senate Transportation, and we are Tuesday, the 21st of January. I want to apologize. We're a little late. We had training on the floor of the Senate, and so we're a little late. So we've got yeah, I don't know if anybody, we have a hard stop at noon, but we've got a little over an hour, and we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem. For the record, my name is Joel Perigo. I am the Municipal Assistance Program Manager for VTrans. And I'm going to start with, this first was on the agenda, was show me the money guy, correct?
Yep, show me the money is first.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start with a slight disclaimer here that this is a document that has been around for many years now, and it doesn't get updated necessarily every time there's a change in multiple programs, funding programs through this document. Some of which VTrans is in control of, and others that are outside of the spectrum of VTrans as well. So the majority of them are in-house, but my thought was just to go right down through each of the programs, just give a brief description and sort of how the programs work. The first one being, and actually the next subject that we're talking about includes some of these, so some of this might be a little duplicate as well. Better Roads program is a state-funded grant program intended for like erosion control, BMP, best management practices type work on gravel roads. Annual solicitation of different categories, mostly related to like stone line ditching, culvert installation and upgrades, things of that nature. Small scale grants. Right now the maximum grant award is $60,000, 20% match. Most of those grants are executed with municipal forces. Sometimes small municipalities will hire out that work. So I'm going to ask a question: is if we're doing this, and it's probably going to. We've had lots of these programs for years and years and years. This has been in place for a long time. How do we know how we're doing? Have we seen a pickup in local programs? In how many grants are being applied for? If is 60,000 enough? How many towns get turned down? So, a lot of us have been around these for a while. Yeah. So I'm fine with you running through it today, but what I'd really like to do is figure out how we're doing. Understood. Yeah. And a lot of that I do typically include in budget testimony later on. Mm-hmm. And certainly I'll take that note back. But I want to make sure that this committee understands where we are, and it would be helpful if we had that ahead of your budget testimony. Okay. Because a lot of times when we get to the budget testimony, you present a number, and it becomes more confrontational at that point. Mm-hmm. And what I'm more interested in is, where are we doing well? What's working? How do we know it's working? And so as we get to the budget, we can talk about where money might be moved around. Yeah. Absolutely. And understands why you did what you do within the budget, yeah, not just with the constraints of dollars. Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, maybe half of these programs are under the control of municipal assistance, yep, whereas the other half are, you're going to hear from other folks on those. And, we don't have good numbers about municipal programs. And we don't have good records about our success and what towns are doing. So I think it's important for us to start to think about that and talk about that. How do we get better numbers?
May I follow up on that?
Sure.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Just as a municipal person, what I've found in small towns and in bigger towns is that there are certain programs that are advertised by V-Trans at certain times of the year, and they do come about at a regular time. But sometimes some of those programs we the towns, maybe 6 weeks notice of the deadline, and 6 weeks is not that much time if you need to go to a select board. Sometimes they only meet once a month. Sometimes they want to know about the project, 2 meetings. So it makes a big difference to get that notification earlier. So that the town has time to prepare, and we could see one of the metrics that I think you asked for was how many towns are applying, because I
And how
know,
many get turned down.
right, because if the application numbers are low, that's a clue that our process might be able to be better.
Under better worlds, better world.
Better world. We're all trying to make a better world.
Do better, we have a better world. And on this category C grants, what did the agency mean when they talk about correct stream bank?
Well, I think the intent there is that, so this is usually a situation where you have a stream coming into, correct probably is not the right word.
Yeah.
I think that's where you're going with it.
Yeah.
Probably it's basically, it's usually hardening of the stream
Right.
and not enough.
Kind of an outdated
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, and honestly, it's usually sort of a negotiation with the river folks on a situation like that, when it's appropriate, when it's not.
Okay.
Yeah. So I noted that information, and I will bring back.
Yeah,
More.
we're gonna have you back before we get to the budget.
Okay.
I'll tell you now.
Okay.
And, we've got limited time.
Yeah.
I want to run through the programs,
Okay.
but I would like numbers.
Okay.
On who's, all the stuff we just talked.
Yep. Bike and ped program. So this is another one that's under municipal assistance, another annual program, federally funded. So, a little more process involved in interstate funded type projects. We fund scoping projects as well as design and construction. 20% local match required on these projects. And because these are federally funded, they require a full engineered set of plans. They have to go out to bid, and be constructed in that manner. Oh, one caveat to that is we do have a small scale category in the bike ped program, which is state funded. It's intended for little gap type projects of sidewalks. I've been missing a 300-foot gap, something like that. Or the common project is installation of our FBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or in the crosswalks and that sort of thing. The split on that is 50%. So 50% state, 50% local match. That has all the other requirements that come along with the federal funding here. The Grants and Aid program is a program that was created as part of the Clean Water Bill. It started at the Department of Environmental Conservation, and that Northwest Regional Planning Commission was administering that on their behalf, and then it made its transition into V-Trans in, let's say 2021, 22, somewhere in there. And so now we are administering that. It's all clean water funded, very similar to Better Roads, intended for best management practices on gravel roads. And it's for compliance with the municipal roads general permit as part of the environmental conservation on gravel roads. So there's one aspect of it on paved roads is catch basin outlets are regulated under MRDP and therefore are eligible under the Grants and Aid program. So you collect all your water in a catch basin and it spits out somewhere. You're not allowed to have erosion in those locations. So, but the majority of the funding that we administer for this, I venture a guess 95% is related to gravel roads.
And maybe right, all roads are hydrologically connected, but it's just like you have to say how each section is connected.
Yeah, so the term in the permit is hydrologically connected road segments. And they're 328 linear feet or 100 meters. And it's based on like theoretically, if you were to drop water in that location, does it make its way into a waterway of some sort, or is it shed into natural vegetation and
Into the ground.
into the ground?
Okay.
Yeah. So if it makes its way into a stream or a river or
it's
lake or pond, it's considered hydrologically connected.
Can't be hydrologically connected by groundwater.
Right. Right. Not in this permit. No. Yeah. And so good point is that this funding all is related to those hydrologically connected road segments. That one, I do have sort of anecdotal information. That's a program that is, we send out a funding opportunity notice in the beginning of end of this winter, beginning of the spring, and towns, all they have to do is send back a notice of intent to apply, or not apply, but to participate. And the participation in that program has been, I'd say it's probably averaging 230 to 240 municipalities each year. They're small grants. They range from 5,000 to 40,000, depending on the amount of funding available. That
Is it mostly ditching?
mostly ditching and installation of stone line ditching, some culvert work.
I would think that a lot comes up in all of us. If I go back to bike and ped, how many of that is sidewalks, how many of that is local trails, how many, all of that sort of stuff would be helpful for us to know before we get the budget and before we go into that. In this, I quite frankly would tell you, I don't think you can get very far in a ditching project for $5,000. So some measurement on, what people are applying for, what that looks like. If I stone a ditch, and my terminology is probably not all that good, but if I stone a ditch, how far can I get for $5,000? And I don't think it's very far. But
Yeah.
so any numbers that we can produce around this, so we get a better picture of what this looks like, would be really helpful. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think if you're going to be providing us with resources like that, something that would be helpful for me to understand is how the grants have increased in relations to inflation. Because one of the points we had made to us yesterday was that the transportation budget is experiencing its buying power being severely decreased, but it doesn't appear that we've increased the grant amounts to similarly reflect that cost shift. That's also, I'm assuming, occurring for municipalities, unless they've got some special deal that we aren't aware of. So that would be really helpful as well.
Yep. All right. Moving into transportation alternatives, another program that's administered through municipal assistance. I will say, yeah. Historically, transportation alternatives has been sort of a sister program to the bike and ped program, mostly bike and ped type projects. Again, when the Clean Water Bill was passed, legislature directed us to spend some of that funding on environmental mitigation category, mitigation projects. And so half of the funding in this program each year goes to those types of projects, and the other half to the other categories that you see listed. This is another federally funded program that requires a 20% local match. And all the categories for this that are eligible under this program are listed here.
This is 300,000.
So yes, except that in transportation bill 2 years ago, there was some notwithstanding information or language included that increased the award to the cap to $600,000, but that will sunset with IIJA. And that's partly due to the fact that when
That will sunset but we got the IIJA is another 4 years. 2 years.
Yeah, and so for the record, Jeremy, chief engineer, and it's a little bit non-specific, right? Because we have a certain period of time to expend those funds from the IIJA. So it won't be that every project after, say, October 1 of 2026 is not IIJA. There still may be some funding, but the bill expires October 1 of 2026.
So is that rule of the 300, because this is all federal match money. And so are we, we're going to have the federal people in here to talk about where they think things are going over time and that. But we did the 600 for the limited time. Yeah, and after the federal money goes away, would we have flexibility to use more federal money under the existing scenario?
I believe under the existing IIJA, we can move traditional formula funds into the Transportation Alternatives Program at our discretion.
Okay, so if they increase the traditional aid to us, we might be able to adjust that. Otherwise, the constraints on what there is for overall money are so great that
Correct.
the agency is okay.
Yeah, and I think it's total crystal ball try to figure out what's going to happen at the federal level with a new reauthorization.
Yep.
But in theory, yes, if they increased our traditional formula funds and decreased transportation alternatives to pre-IIJA levels, it's likely that we could transfer traditional formula funds into this program.
Okay. Right.
Thank you. So these increased funds, do those also have a requirement that half of the funding go to clean water?
yes, so when the IIJA, so the TA set aside pre-IIJA was somewhere in the magnitude of 2.1 or $2.2 million. With IIJA, it bumped up to like 4.3 million. But the statute still requires us to take half of that 4.3, put it into the environmental mitigation category, and the other half to the rest of the categories.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Do we still have a committee that approves these grants?
Yes,
I know in the past.
yes, but it was so
It was reconstituted and stripped of some of its powers.
Was it?
a while ago.
Not, yeah, but not too long.
No, Yeah.
Probably in the last 6 years.
yeah,
Yeah, in the last 6 years.
yeah. Yeah. So we do include folks from ANR, DEC on the panel, given the environmental mitigation component of it. Making sure that, the projects that we're awarding are aligned with their goals as
So
well.
no legislators any longer.
No.
Okay.
RPC representatives, DEC representatives,
Yeah.
V-Trans representatives. Yeah. Municipal Highway and Stormwater Mitigation Program, another program that was born out of the Clean Water Bill, in-house to municipal assistance. Somewhat related to TA and the fact that this funding is basically sort of what Jeremy was just saying, funding that we're now flexing into the TA program from our formula funds. under that environmental mitigation category. So it's just additional projects that are funded with that same eligibility. So it's federally funded, 80% federal and 20% local match. And here's a list of projects that we fund with those, transportation runoff, sand and salt sheds. We do a fair amount of large scale culvert replacements.
Remember Paul Papers, we've been doing that? Is anybody-
Not very often. I don't know that we've ever funded any. I've only ever seen one. There's one Burlington along the waterfront, but
Well, sorry, listen,
The permeable pavers, I think at one point people thought that was gonna be a bigger thing. It's not.
what's that? Sorry.
That people thought we were gonna do more, and it's my understanding, they just get clogged up and they are no longer permanent.
Well, I know I can't speak to it very well, but I don't know if you want to speak to the Randolph.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Senator. It was a very aspirational technology that I think in practice isn't as isn't living up to the optimistic promise that it.
But in the situation that it was like the Burlington waterfront has a walkway with permanent pavers, and it's not being drove on and treated, and I don't know. I don't think we funded that, but I think it's working in that situation.
many, salt sheds for towns have we done?
Successfully.
Well, most of them run into trouble.
We've had a lot of
I just had one town, Elmore, that they had to move their salt shed and they waited 15 years to do it. And it was right next to the lake. So, and it took them forever to find help.
So we had, it's a category we've struggled in. Partly, I think it's, the V-Trans is not, our specifications that are not well set up for vertical construction. We struggled through that, we're built to build roads and, but
Is this any federal money? How much is it? This matching too, or?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 80-20,
Okay,
80% federal, 20% local.
okay.
And so I don't have those numbers necessarily with me today, but we've had some successful projects. Actually, in the next presentation, I do have one picture of one we completed in Pittsfield. But we've had several that it's not enough money to build what the towns want, and it's only eligible specifically for that mitigation part of it. It's not intended to be adding on offices and storage of equipment and those sorts of things where towns want that as an addition.
No, I'm just talking about a small town that sitting within 50 yards of a lake.
Yeah.
That has been struggled for years to be able to get to the place. Go ahead.
Are there any towns that are still storing their salt in open piles, uncovered piles?
Oh, yeah.
There definitely are. The town I live in does. I mean, but I don't know.
Because I was surprised in Brian Gate, I was surprised that it seemed like it was pretty recent that they could, but they had all this groundwater contamination.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how common that was still. But it's very common, like, is a third of the towns are still doing it?
I don't know.
We don't see that.
They had the ribbon cutting in Elmore this summer.
Yeah,
And the pile was open 50 yards from the lake.
Yeah, that we could have more conversation on this if possible, because I think, a lot of towns don't have it. I would like to know more. That might be something that towns could coordinate on and have a salt shed at the boundary, basically, because it's really expensive.
build a shed.
Yeah, I mean, for a regular, I mean, not Montpelier, but for a regular town, it's very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have a sort of a showcase type project. I have a picture of it. I can bring more information, but like the town of Pittsfield was, pretty small town. They used their funding. They built exactly what they needed. But it's not an overly sized project or shed, and it doesn't have a bunch of equipment storage and offices included.
Right.
But what we offered them worked for them. So,
It's why we need numbers. We need to know
Yep.
who's applying, what's happening in these programs. It's almost impossible to sit here and make a judgment about any of this without knowing what the demands are for. And why the agency, when you come in to do the budget, why you would make the recommendations. We understand all the pressures.
Well said.
Next is a program,
That's Wilder, I think. Maybe it's not.
could be. Municipal Park and Ride Program this is the state funded park and ride program. So this is, again, small municipal grants. It's 80-20 split. I do have some data typically in my budget testimony related to how many spots we've created with this program. It's pretty small. We're doing 2 or 3 of these projects per year.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is Wilder. I can see the mobile station behind it. On this particular point, and it might be a conversation for later, but I want to flag, there has been some lack of clarity about who regulates those spaces, those park and rides, and in particular that park and ride. When people stay overnight and potentially the neighbors nearby to the park and ride feel not happy with that situation. You know, I'm not trying to say that there's a specific outcome that needs to happen, but it's unclear who should be the decider of those situations, and it seems to fall on the towns. In this program, how much does the state look after these places or maintain them, or is it fully on the town afterwards? And who has the authority with those spaces if there are, let's say, people staying overnight or vandalism?
Yeah, so this particular program is all town owned and maintained. This is not a grant program related to the V-Trans park and ride programs. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all on the town.
This is all on town. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. Not much more to say on that one. Town Highway Bridge Program, this is a little outdated. As I mentioned, this document's been around for many years now and it needs some updates. So the Town Highway Bridge Program is a program that comes out of V-Trans and is managed internal to V-Trans. And projects are selected through the VPSP2 process.
As long as it's over 20 feet, it fits in, it goes through the regular
Correct. Right.
program of prioritizing and everything. So
Right. So not an actual grant program.
this is not a grant program.
Right. But it is town funding. These are town-owned bridges that come out of this, yes. So this does require some updates. Town Highway Structured Program is the next one. That is a grant program that is administered through our districts. So this is for bridges, culverts, retaining walls on classes 1, 2, and 3 town highways.
I thought the grant award was more than 175.
It is.
I thought it was 350 or better,
200.
200.
200, so that was changed in statute 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
So again, there's some that needs to be changed as well.
And I'll flat out tell you, this is from the towns I represent, woefully inadequate from their point of view.
Okay. So this is a program that when Chad Greenwood comes in, he will be providing testimony on that. So if you're looking for specific information, I would recommend letting him know. So Town Highway Structures, and then the sister program to that is the following, the Town Highway Class 2 program, which is Class 2 paving. That as well would be under Chad Greenwood. And that one out also was increased to
I think
200,000.
you can pass back to Chad and Megan. We'll want to have him specifically in to talk about this. And run through what the applications are, and we'll probably have the league in right behind him.
Yeah.
Because, this is particularly for one of the places where, the two programs that are the direct grants, there's about 8 million here and 8 million in the other. There's the two places where towns, when they get in trouble, need help.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing more and more from towns that there's not enough resources when they face a big project that's a catastrophe. If you take a small town of 600 or 800 people and they have a culvert that costs 800,000, you're in.
So this, I will say, Chad has access to several built-in programs. So this is much better tracked than some of the other programs.
And
They
that's,
have some reports that they can provide you as far as,
and that's why we're gonna, you can take back that Chad's gonna be in here.
Yep.
And we're gonna wanna spend some time here.
yep, will do. Town highway emergency grants. So this is state funding for when there's no federal declaration, so a very localized storm event that might trigger something like this. And this is another Chad program. 90% of the eligible cost, or that cost minus an amount equal to 10% of the overall budget minus the winter maintenance budget. It's a really strange little statute. But again, intended for
This is,
a small,
yeah, this is when you don't get declared a federally.
exact, no FEMA, no federal highway ER.
How much is it now?
I don't know that I have that information. I don't believe there's a cap on it.
Well, it's always been a very limited amount.
It is a limited
of money.
amount, correct.
It's like a couple million.
There was always I thought there was a cap.
There was a cap on the overall, but not on each town's.
Yeah, we put a very limited amount in there.
Yeah, and I did manage this program for a few years, and in the years that I did, we never did spend all the funding. We were triggering federal events that the money would come out of. There wasn't a lot of the
The
state
floods in my
funding.
area have been so big that we're way past this.
Yeah. The next is systemic local road safety program, which is the high risk rural roads program. These projects get selected based on the risk rather than crash data. It works through the projects are identified with the local regional planning commissions. They make their way into V-Trans and are administered as V-Trans project. But again, they're on town highways.
So is this? So this is all based on crash data.
This is based on the risk of crash. It's not on actual crash.
And underneath it is utilizing the latest 5-year crash data, so it seems like. After reducing.
So this is a program that I do not administer, but is in this book, and so I would have to dig into it a little bit.
Because this one I'm not familiar with.
This
Yeah, Chair. So that's, I believe, through our safe systems engineer, our highway safety and beach program, highway safety improvement program. And be happy to come in and discuss it at your desire.
Is it Bill?
no, this has been around for quite a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
So then we get into the 3 different FEMA grant programs, which at one time were internal to V-Trans, but were moved under Vermont Emergency Management. So the contact references Kim Canarici from Vermont Emergency Management. There's some basic information about programs in here. But they are certainly the subject matter experts on these programs. They got FEMA public assistance, hazard mitigation, and the BRIC program. And then moving into federal highway emergency relief, as it relates to town highways, when there is a declared event, and there are town highways that are federally aided, that are affected and result in projects, those do come through municipal assistance. If they fall under the emergency category, they're 100% federally funded. If they rise to the level of a permanent project, meaning they need to be designed and constructed in that manner, they revert back to the traditional 80-20. Actually, I'm sorry, they revert to 10% local share, generally 80% federal and 10% state. So these are on federally aided town highways, typically like your class 2 roadways in your towns. Not all of them.
That's it. So so that's a different category. I'm not aware of that category. Is that like an overlay category on our class 1 and 2?
So there's no like clean cut answer for me to get. So your class 1 town highways, which are your downtown, Route 2 in Montpelier would be a class 1. If that were affected by an event, that would fall under the Federal Highway Emergency Program, and it would be a grant through our program. There's some class 2s, but not all class 2s. I don't have a good example of one that it's usually you're connecting roads from one town to another, like your sort of back route, typically paved.
So I guess, do we know what those roads are now, or do you have?
Yeah,
to
oh
wait
yes,
until we get an
yeah. There's
okay.
a functional classification map that lays them all out for you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Thank you.
It would be nice to have that map and see which roads that we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Is it on the trans?
It's right on the map in the mapping sections. Yeah. Actually, I use it quite often. If you just search V-Trans functional classification, it would pop right up.
Sometimes there's a debate about what classification is of road, so you go to that map. So I mean, the people like, oh, that's a class X, Y.
Yeah. Well, so that the one that I'm talking about is it's a functional classification of federal aid roads. If you're talking about classes 1, 2, 3, 4 roads, those are
not the town, just the state.
Those are the class 1, 2, 3, 4 town roads. There's an individual map for each town within the mapping section that gets updated. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's actually how towns, the town highway state aid that towns receive the quarterly payments on. It's based on their certified mileage that they have for each year. So they go out, they provide a classification 1, 2, 3. The Better Connections Grant Program is in a partnership between V-Trans in our planning section and ACCD. This is for like master planning of downtown pedestrian accommodations, connectivity, different things, mostly planning type activities though.
So, may I ask, so the funding for that program, is there something other than transportation funds in it? Because ACCD is involved?
I do not know the answer to that. I'd have to investigate that. You're maybe on the inside on that one. No.
$200,000 it says 200,000 in projects funds. But is there 200,000 per a maximum 200,000 grant? Yeah.
I don't. This is a program that's
Yeah.
not municipal assistance. This is, yeah.
It actually says funding provided by the Agency of Commerce and Green Development. So that would be interesting to know.
Okay. Take that information. Yep. The next is programmed through our public transit section.
It is, sorry, I walked into my favorite grant program.
We probably know more about it than I do. This is in this book, and I'm just, so this is for transportation demand management type programs, planning, infrastructure, everything, bike shares, those sorts of things. And then the Government Highway Safety Program. These grants are typically administered to your sheriff's offices, and local police departments. For work zone monitoring and that sort of thing. And
Where is this planted now?
that's through the same group that Jeremy, Highway Safety.
So for Operations and Safety Bureau, so they manage
In the agency?
yeah, within the highway
Because
division.
for years, this was in the governor's office.
No, it's in Operations Safety Bureau within the highway division, and we issue grants. I believe they're typically NHTSA funds,
Okay,
that go to municipalities and sheriff's offices.
okay.
And the last is some information on the Vermont State Infrastructure Bank. The town of, I think we've had one project that went through municipal assistance that utilized this funding was for the replacement of a Fisher Road culvert in Berlin. When they had a failure there, they used the State Infrastructure Bank, and we provided oversight of the project. And that is the end of this document, some contacts at the end of the document. So.
So if you could just let Megan know, particularly for those areas that you would accept for the structures, and because we'll have those two programs in separately.
Yep.
And we'll spend some time.
Sure.
But if we could get you back here to run through numbers and back with the stuff.
Yep.
And whenever, it'll be a little while before we get to the budget. We ought to have a better idea of
Mhm.
demand before. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a sense with each of these grant programs, what you would, or what you have seen from towns in terms of time it takes them to complete the grant application, the amount of staff that they typically need to apply, or like the level of, I don't want to use sophistication, but I'm not finding a better word, but like the level of highly trained staff it may take to apply for the.
Yeah, it highly varies depending on the program. And I can speak to, the programs that I oversee, which are sort of the top, whenever it was half done or so. When you look at like the Better Roads program, it's pretty simple, and usually, honestly, it's like a road foreman are typically filling out a written copy of, we've seen applications that run the full gamut of, paragraphs of information to one sentence, so those are, we try to keep them simple. There's not a lot of risk involved with those types of projects. The money is fairly low. It's, they're quick maintenance type projects. So the application process is pretty simple. When you talk about more like the bike ped and the transportation alternatives, where we're talking about federally funding and more money, there's a lot more required of it. Typically, we would suggest that a town go through a scoping effort ahead of time, which we fund. I'll say we fund all scoping efforts as long as they're eligible. So if a town comes to us and says we want to scope this project, it's pretty much automatically funded.
Okay.
And so then they have better information to come back to us for design and construction funding for that project later on.
And do you have a sense of how many of our towns are relying on this grant funding to basically keep the ship moving? Because they Or are these programs really kind of like cream on top of the work that they are?
I'd say the most of them are sort of the cream on the top, especially when you're talking about bike ped and DA and that sort of thing. But when you talk about grants and aid and better roads, I mean, there's a fair amount of money there that it's related to maintenance type activities. I think it ties into their town highway aid that they received, those sorts of things.
So I guess my final question on this topic would be, how many of these projects are happening without the grant?
That's the question that I don't know that I could answer. I mean, we give out grants. I'm not, there's no way for us to track, projects that are occurring outside of the work that we're funding, if that's what you're asking.
Sure. Do you have
Yeah.
a recommendation of where we might find?
Well, I think in terms of that municipal back roads work, it would be related to the work that occurs under the municipal roads general permit. And so if you would be with DEC, somebody in that area, there has to be work occurring outside of the funding that we're provided.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is if they're not doing the projects without the grant funding, probably means that if we don't update the grants, that those projects won't occur at all. So I'm trying to get a sense of that. And I know that the V-Trans does not track municipal budgets or how much they're spending individually. And I think that's a disservice to our communities that we don't keep an eye on that, because I do think it leads to extreme variability in road condition that whether or not it's funded by the state or by a town, we all experience on our roads. But I don't necessarily have a solution for that, but I appreciate your thoughtful answer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had another.
Yep, we got 20 minutes.
Okay.
Or a little more, but. And just as I said, we could use more data on all of it to figure out how we come up with need.
Yeah. So first off, I apologize, I didn't change the date. I was scheduled for last Friday and got moved around to today, so I will.
We wouldn't have even noticed.
Well, I think Megan took care of it on the front sheet for me here, but maybe not, I don't know. So this is on the V-Trans Municipal Mitigation Program, which is really just an umbrella of some of the programs we've just talked about, which is the Better Roads, Grants and Aid, and the Municipal Highway and Stormwater Mitigation. And I put sort of the goal of what the Municipal Mitigation Program is, and it's mostly related to municipal compliance with the Municipal Roads General Permit and alignment of the goals of the Clean Water Act. A lot of this, like I said, I'm probably going to say the same thing I just said, but Better Roads is both grant funding and technical assistance, with funding coming through the Clean Water Fund as well as transportation funds. We do maintain a Better Roads manual. It's updated persistently, and it basically outlays best management practices on gravel roads. Grants and aid I talked about, that's clean water funded. We provide technical assistance with compliance with the MRGP. We also work with municipalities on the reporting of the work that they do with our funding, which ultimately is the same thing they have to do for work that they're doing outside of funding for the MRGP. And then the Municipal Highway and Stormwater Mitigation Program, which is grant funding through Federal Highway, and our engineered projects that are required to follow project data development process, and they're follow a low bid, seal bid process. So this program has it's historically been a combination of clean water funds, transportation funds. We have funded with federal funds in the past for road erosion inventories. It's a competitive application period that's done annually, typically announced in the fall, and then the awards are announced in the early spring. I think I already mentioned that it's $20,000 to $60,000 grants with a 20% local match, but that match is typically provided with an in-kind service. And I'd say probably 80% of these projects are completed with municipal staff, and some of them are bid out through local contracting procedures.
How long has it been 20 to 60?
I'd have to look back, but I would say probably 8 years, somewhere in there. I guess.
Just wonder when the agency came in last week and we get the inflation project and we see the 40% increase in inflation in our own projects.
Yeah.
How we measure this.
Yeah, I will take that into consideration when I put together some data for sure. And part of it is sort of trying to spread it a little bit equitably too, working with.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
But, the pressure we're under.
Yeah.
And, for state, I can't believe that towns aren't facing the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I just highlighted again the manual and the fact that we have municipal staff available to municipalities for the purposes of whatever it may be, going out in the field, working with them on the computer to report their work. And we provided over 1,000 hours in state fiscal year 24.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many of these projects are bringing roads at the municipal level up to compliance with our regulations? Because at least in my community, what I've heard is that, and I know we talk about unfunded mandates till the cows come home, but it seems like a lot of the use of this grant program is to just kind of comply rather than to, yeah.
So this funding, the clean water funds that come through Better Roads as well as grants and aid require that when that project is done, that those segments are fully compliant with.
Okay.
So 100% essentially. So 100% of the funding that comes through these two programs are resulting in full compliance.
So what happens if I'm a town that applies for a Better Roads grant application and I don't get it, and my road is still out of compliance? I have to fund that out of my municipal budget? And is there any support for that? Is there any leeway? You didn't get the funding, so you've got a time horizon of 3 years or something to actually meet.
Well, that's under the permit regulations that I don't know inside and out.
Oh, okay.
But the funding, the only I would add is that we have multiple opportunities. The Better Roads comes out in the fall. So if they did apply, didn't get the funding, grants and aid comes out in the spring. There's also town highway aid quarterly payments that come out through V-Trans that are another option for funding those types of projects.
Okay, but there's no you're in trouble, you didn't meet it because you didn't get the grant. There's no
I'm not a regulator.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the permit well enough to say. I know there are certain requirements within the permit for every 5 years they have to have a certain amount up to date, and then another one, but I don't know exactly what those numbers are.
But you take that into account with a grant application.
Yes, we do take that information into account in the scoring and the awards of the funding.
Okay, so it would
So-
be more likely if you were a town that wasn't compliant repeatedly, that you would more likely be a recipient of this grant.
And if they're identifying high priority segments per the permit.
Thank you. That is very helpful.
And these are just some example projects that have come out of funding through the Better Roads program.
Joel, I want to commend you on not having photos, none of which are in our districts.
Yeah.
Because I think in the past, it seemed to me that there was a coincidence of the photos with the district. So you succeeded in not having any project.
Well done. It's
A
fine.
lot of Grand Isle photos in that.
I'll take that as a compliment. This one's not labeled, that's in Troy. That picture has been tossed around and used in multiple locations because it came out so great, but
It's a nice one.
this is sort of your quintessential grants and aid type project, stone line ditching, bringing the road bed up to grade, proper crown, I think there's some cross culverts, in the background area, so.
How much did that cost? And what year was that?
That one, I think that was in 22, I think, that's right. It's not all that long
I'd be
ago, but
interested in it to see how much that cost.
yeah, it was a grants and aid project. And again, those grants and aid, depending on the amount of funding available in those years, I mean, those usually range, I guess, at $5,000 to $40,000, with the median's probably in that $20,000 range. So,
And how many times do the towns put in more than that their share of?
I can,
It would be interested to see with the projects, you know, I get that, you know, it's a 20 to 60, but I suspect that a lot of towns, the project is more significant than that, but they get as much as they can.
yeah. I think we talked about this several times already, so, it's a formula-based award. So depending on the number, the mileage of their hydrologically connected roads, they get their sort of share of that pot per year.
Mhm.
And then the municipal highway and stormwater mitigation program is federally funded. So it does require the full process. These projects are typically a 3 to 5 year duration. Intended to be larger scale. No, there's no max or min grant amount, but it does require 20% match, cash match in this case, not in kind. And typical projects are the stormwater planning and treatment, large culvert replacements, and salt sheds. And then some more of the projects that were funded out of the municipal highway program. This is the Pittsfield sand and salt shed that I was speaking of earlier. Chester, that's the Popple Dungeon Road. It's probably one of the coolest road names around.
Yeah, we have, it's Papa Dungeon in my district.
Brandon is some rain gardens, and then Brownton. Can't think of the name of the river that dumps into Willoughby there, but that was a stabilization project along the road there. And that's a lot.
Thanks. Any more questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any trends nationally that we are following when it comes to funding municipal roads and bridge projects, or are we, or do we do it totally differently? Are we, I'm wondering if, you know, you've got a big picture view with all the different grants. I'm wondering how we fare in our practices compared to maybe the national picture. Not a trick question, not a trick question.
No.
Genuinely trying to.
I think nationally, sort of the hierarchy of governments and the different funding schemes vary so greatly that it anecdotally it'd be tough to discern any real trends. You know, I think we could look at it programmatically, right? Like how much does a municipal road network cost? But again, just grants and aid and whether money comes through the state or county government. I mean, I think there's just so many different schemes that I don't think we can make any conclusion at this point.
Okay, thank you. I mean, when I went to the National Conference of State Legislators, I was really proud of Vermont because I was having conversations with legislators where the members of the committees were deciding projects and grants in a way that felt bad. Like we can joke about Senator Mazza having had lots of photos of his district, but it would have been different if that was also the deciding factor for a grant or a project. So I really appreciate that. That's not the way that we do business here, because it seems much more professional, egalitarian. So I appreciate that we continue to maintain that. So.
Thank you. So that is a conversation, but that's a whole separate conversation. Just how we evaluate projects.
Yeah.
But this has been really interesting. And obviously stormwater is a huge part of what we're doing now. But do we expect stormwater to be that same proportion in, say, 10 years, 5 years? The maintenance of the stone ditches is something I wanted to learn more about in our conversation, because that's a real challenge. But in terms of getting everything in compliance, how far are we to compliance? And, there will be maintenance after compliance, but we're still getting in compliance, right? So how far along are we? And that can be a future meeting.
So the one thing there's annually Clean Water Investment Report that comes out. Has a lot of that information
Okay.
included in it.
Great.
And that all of the clean water funding that comes into V-Trans, which goes out through grants and aid and Better Roads. And then we do have we're actually putting together some federally funded projects as well with that right now, and any that go through the municipal highway stormwater program. We report on those projects at their completion. We provide that back to the Department of Environmental Conservation, and they include it in that report annually. And I don't know exactly how it's all broken down,
Okay.
but
Great.
it is in there. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.